This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
Music at its low-frequency worst can inspire aggression, transgression, division, anxiety, and exploitation. At its best, it can aid in momentarily transcending a world that can sometimes feel one-dimensional and preoccupied with status and material accumulation. In the mid-'80s, I gravitated towards music that aided in transporting me out of the somnambulistic suburb where I grew up into realms hitherto unfathomed. Much of this music seemed to come from a label out of London called 4AD. Some bands such as Bauhaus, the Wolfgang Press, Cocteau Twins, and This Mortal Coil were some of the groups coming out of 4AD who all seemed so otherworldly to me. Other, but altogether familiar. When I first heard Cocteau Twins for the first time in a dorm room on the campus of the Kansas City Art Institute, my musical world was never the same. A portal had been opened, never again to be sealed. It was their third album, Treasure, and it came along right at the time that my mind was expanding exponentially because of the conducive environment of being away from home, the creativity and community that was encouraged by the art school and all of the outcasts that it attracted, and the availability of a vast variety of controlled substances. I was a closeted romantic. I preferred music that moved me to tears and transported me as opposed to music that spawned mosh pits and discontent. High on this list of sacred music was a 4AD band called Dead Can Dance. I bought it on vinyl because 1, it was on 4AD, and 2, the cover looked cool. It was their second album, Spleen and Ideal, and it got me through getting pulled out of art school, returning to the soul-deadening labyrinth of strip malls that was my hometown, getting kicked out of my house, and finally returning back to Kansas City, where it actually felt like home amongst people who I could call kindred spirits. Somewhere in this same city, even in this same circle of friends, Hunter coexisted decades before we were ever to meet. She too was also drawn to 4AD, the otherworldly music that they put out, and, in particular, Dead Can Dance. So when she found out that Peter Ulrich, a former member of Dead Can Dance, was putting out a book about his experiences with the band, we knew not only that we had to read the book, but also to have Peter on the show. So we reached out, and he agreed, and he is here with us today. Hunter begins the conversation by explaining why it was important for us to have Peter on to talk about this book.
So I'm Hunter, obviously, and this is my husband, Chris. This is your absolutely amazing book that I really, really love.
Thank you.
It's one of the types of books that I know I love it because I don't want it to end. And so I'm really taking my time. I'm being very, very, I'm pacing myself because I'm 56. Chris is, I'm 56, right? Yeah. Chris is 58. And so this book represents a very poignant, beautiful period of my life and his life. And so we are so honored to have you to do a dive into a world that we have long desired to see, have a different perspective of, and you are giving kind of the inside view of what it was like to be on the road with Dead Can Dance and this very beautiful period of music.
It's a very beautiful thing to touch people in that way. I've had that response from a number of people, and it's very moving. It wasn't something I really thought about at the time I was writing, but the reason I went with Red Hen Press, the publishing company, was that I had a very similar kind of response from Kate, who is the wife of the couple who run that company, and there were elements of the story that had been very much all a part of the process when they were setting up their publishing company, and that music had been with them all through the 90s, when they were getting established. And that was sort of the most important thing to me in the decision about going with them for the publishing. And they've done a lovely job with the book, and it shows.
Yeah.
So yeah, I very much appreciate your response to it in that way. It's lovely.
Yes, and during the 80s, the 4AD label in general, like, so much stuff came out on that really just I think music at its best can expand your mind space. Like, it can take you to places where maybe you didn't even think of before, and you listen to Cocteau Twins are a good example of that too, This Mortal Coil. Um
Absolutely.
but Dead Can Dance, it was one of the first 4AD albums that I bought, Spleen and Ideal. It's one of the few albums that I can just think of it and I start to tear up. Like, it's that important to me. Like, so you're a god in my world. So
And just to give you a little bit of background about us,
Yes.
Chris was born in a place called Columbia, Missouri, and grew up in a town called St. Charles, Missouri.
Okay.
I my father was a professional wrestler, and I grew
Oh,
up all over the
okay.
United States,
Mm,
primarily in Kansas City.
right.
Um, and so what I've always said is it was really easy to be cool if you grew up in New York and Los
Mm,
Angeles. But if you grew up in the Midwest, you either had to have a friend who had traveled and gone and got a record and brought it back, and then you shared it amongst your friends, or you had to have a cool record store.
right.
And in our case, there was a record store called Enormous Horsepower. And I have to give a shout out to a friend of mine, Steve Duty, who owned Enormous Horsepower. And he was the person who introduced me to the 4AD ecosystem. And
Mm,
so anytime a 4AD album came in, I bought it because I knew it was going to be something that I would respond to and that I would love. And I get very emotional when I think about your first album. And that's an album that I think is very close to you in many ways.
very much.
Um,
Mm.
but what maybe where we can start, I feel like I want to cry, but maybe where we can start is you can just kind of give a little bit of background about your journey, your musical journey. Like,
Oh,
where did this all start for you?
so I'm a little bit older even than you two are, which is a bit of a frightening thing these days. So, but even though I mean I was born and grew up in London in England, but even though I was in in a major uh, capital city, I still had that same kind of experience where there was when I was a kid at school, there was a local record store, particularly secondhand records, which put them more in my in my capability to buy things. Where it was so this was kind of early 70s, and a lot of the stuff that I was listening to at that time, a lot of the stuff that I was discovering was what you'd now kind of, I guess, lump together as prog rock, but it was, early Genesis stuff and Pink Floyd and some of the sort of verging on heavier rock stuff like Deep Purple and whatever. But also just starting to hear some of those early world music sounds starting to creep into some of the Mahavishnu Orchestra stuff, and maybe things mainstream artists, but people like Santana were doing. And it always tended to be that kind of thing that went a little bit off the mainstream that would appeal to my ear when I was hearing that kind of Latin percussion and a bit of African percussion, Middle Eastern percussion, that kind of thing coming into the frame. That was really, that my ear was immediately drawn to those kind of sounds. So so that was a very important sort of formative period for me. And then in the late 70s, a lot of the UK record labels started to discover Africa, and we started to get these actual African albums being released on the Island label and one or two others. So then I was really starting to listen to stuff that was coming out of Lagos in Nigeria, out of the East Coast, some of the early South African stuff. A radio DJ in the UK who you may know of, John Peel,
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
was right. He was playing a lot of independent. He was like a real sort of maverick in the broadcasting world, and just played whatever they put him on late at night, where they thought that nobody would bother. But he actually had a huge audience, and just completely controlled what he played. So he was playing a mix of the indie rock stuff that was coming out at the time, but also starting to play a lot of this world music that was becoming available at the time. So that all sort of went into my melting pot. And yeah, so it was at that point when I first met Brendan and Lisa, and that incredibly fortunate coincidence for me. Um, that's what I was listening to. I was listening to, on one hand, to be Joy Division and a lot of and Cocteau Twins and Birthday Party, the indie bands that were around at the time, and on the other hand, there was a lot of sort of African, starting to hear some of the stuff like Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, the in
Oh, yeah.
Pakistani and Indian musics. That was all coming into the mix. So I guess
Babatunde
by
Olatunji.
sorry.
Babatunde Olatunji.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well. In actual fact, no. That he was introduced to me by Brendan. I didn't know of
Oh,
him
okay.
until I met Brendan, and
Gotcha.
his music was one of the first things that Brendan ever introduced me to. So yeah, so that was kind of where my headspace was, where my the music that was buzzing around in my brain when I met Brendan and Lisa, but they were already playing this kind of stuff, and I wasn't. I was at the time I met them. I'd been playing in a sort of rock soul blues band, which I loved and was great, but I wasn't. But this was just playing standards. I wasn't um, I hadn't before I met them. I hadn't met anyone who was actually using these kind of influences in what they were writing and recording. So yeah, as I say, I was a very fortunate meeting. Just happened to be in the right place at that classic old thing, right place, right time, and yeah, got drawn into their world, which was just mind blowing for me.
I would love it if you would tell us that story because it's so amazing. It is such a synchronicity of how you kind of ended up in their world. I would love to hear you tell that to our audience.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, this is where the book starts basically, which was that I was working in 1982 at I was the press and publicity officer at a fringe theatre in London called Riverside Studios in Hammersmith, and that was an incredible job. I mean, they had a fantastic program of events, some really incredible theatre from all over the world. We had productions coming in from South Africa, from Brazil, from Poland, all sorts of different things. They were amazing shows to work on. We also had a music program there and a visual arts program, so it was very, very diverse. But it was it was a small theatre. It had a capacity of about 400 people. And was really sort of programming far beyond its means, and then its grant funding got cut, and the whole thing went pear shaped. So going into the December of that year, we'd been the few of us who were left working there. We were kind of on a skeleton staff anyway, but the few of us who were left got told that we were being made redundant. And at that exact moment, I received this phone call. I mean, in the book, I say it was on the same day. I can't. If I'm honest about it, it might not have been the exact same day I received that redundancy letter, but it was, within days. I had this phone call from Brendan, a friend of mine, another drummer on the housing estate where I lived in London, had given Brendan my phone number and I just got this phone call out of the blue from somebody I'd never heard of saying, we're looking for a drummer. Are you interested? So I said, well, yeah, maybe, because it looks like the rest of what I'm doing is about to go up in the air. So we met up, and I heard the story that he and Lisa and Paul, who was there, the original bassist, had arrived in London some months earlier, and they'd been rehoused in an apartment that was in the next block to where I was living. And yeah, they'd come over from Australia with this band that they'd formed, Dead Can Dance. Their original drummer decided not to make the journey over from Australia, so they'd arrived minus a drummer, but looking for a record deal and looking to start playing, and needed a drummer. So was I interested? Well, yes, very much. Especially when I heard what when they started to play me some of the stuff they were playing. It was um, a quite a rundown housing estate right on the River Thames in London. Some big old tower blocks that were quite. It was quite a rough area, but the actual flats themselves had these amazing views over the river.
Mm.
So they were they were quite beautiful flats inside if you did them up. But but between the two blocks that we lived in, there was this old community hall, which was really run down, wire grills up over the windows to stop the local kids smashing the windows and all this kind of thing. So it wasn't a glamorous environment at all. And it was in this hall that we hired for a rehearsal session, and that's where I was given my audition. And when I first heard what they were playing, it was really mind blowing to me. But it wasn't anything that I'd ever played before, so I really had no idea what to do. But anyway, we struggled through a couple of things, and I got chatting to Brendan, Lisa, and Paul, and we found that we had quite a lot in common, and we immediately got on really well together, and had a lot of similar interests, and certainly a lot of crossover in our musical Venn diagrams. So they decided that they could bear with me and bring me up to standard. So they persevered. Brendan, in particular, was an incredible mentor and teacher, even though he wasn't a drummer himself. And yeah, it was just an amazing experience, and what they were doing musically was just incredible. It blew me away, and to actually be involved in something like this was, yeah, it was just like fantastic. So and it went on from there.
Yeah, what they seem to be doing, well, not maybe not so much on the first album, but they were a good blend of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, sort of whatever you call Joy Division, whatever kind of rock Joy Division was, and world elements. That really started to kick in, I think, on Spleen and Ideal, which seems to be a huge musically a huge evolutionary leap from the first self-titled Dead Can Dance and the EP after that. I mean, my God, I would love to get into what happened in between those 2
Yeah.
albums, but yeah, so that probably, catered to your tastes, that you were already into about world music and all these other different genres of music, so it was probably very challenging and exciting for you, I would imagine.
Yeah, so when we first met, we really didn't have two pennies to rub together. We were, you know, I had this sort of really old beat up beginner's drum kit from way back, and Brendan had a very cheap sort of copy guitar. And yeah, we basically we you know we didn't we were struggling to make ends meet. So everything was done with just the very limited resources that we had. And when we went into the studio to make the first album, we were given 2 weeks to, which I know, you know, back in the day, people used to think, oh, you can knock out an album in a couple of days. This is no problem. But it's not quite as straightforward. And it was still, you know, for what we were trying to do, it was a relatively tight time schedule. Um, so yeah, we were a guitar, bass, drums band, and for sure, I was massively into Joy Division, and so was Brendan. Lisa, I, I always my memories from back at that time was that she was really into Joy Division as well, but she said subsequently that she wasn't so much. But anyway, um, I mean, certainly not that she didn't like them. She was certainly liked their music, but it wasn't such a huge influence as to her. But for Brendan and I in particular, that was a very strong influence. And but obviously also they were working, you know, they were very keen on on bringing in other sounds and broadening the palette. So when I first met them, Lisa had the Yang Qin, this Chinese hammered dulcimer, which, you know, became was always core to a lot of things that we did with Dead Can Dance, and she also used it in a couple of the This Mortal Coil tracks as well. And she also had a squeeze box, which we didn't use very much, but it was there in the background. And the one percussion item that they'd brought with them from Australia, I don't know how they managed to get it over, but they brought this quite big African barrel drum. So these were all incorporated into what we were doing. They were always looking to bring in other instruments, just go beyond the guitar, bass, drums setup. Um, and also, it was also at the time when the industrial bands were about. So you had people like Einstürzende, Neubauten, and SBK in Australia, who they'd been friends with. And so people who are using metal percussion and stuff. So we had one or two tracks where we were using some metal percussion as well. So it was all about using, you know, these were things that we'd find in, you know, go rooting around in scrap heaps and things. So it was all about, you know, just using anything that we could get our hands on to broaden the the musical palette that we were working with. Um, and so the the first track that they ever played me of their own the music that they'd recorded back in Australia was the track Frontier,
Hmm.
which Brendan had actually recorded the percussion for that using this set of oil drums, old empty oil drums, and just making this. quite sort of tribal rhythm on it. And then so the only actual instruments that were used on that were those and the yang chin, and then it was done. Brendan did the backing vocals with just his low voice, and then Lisa added the main main vocal to it, and it was all really done just with that setup. So there were no guitars, bass, standard drums or anything in that track. But it's again, it was the first thing they played me of theirs, and I thought it was incredible. I thought, wow, this is what a fantastic, incredible mix of sounds. Um, so yeah, we were even on that first album, although it is very much a guitar bass drums album, you can still hear the beginnings of us starting to bring in those other sounds. And then in between that and Spleen and Ideal, we did a 4-track EP, the Garden of Arcane Delights, which has subsequently been released as a CD set with with the first album, which makes for a great collection of songs actually. And on that we were starting to use the drum kit more as just the toms without any snare and with no cymbals and just doing rhythms. And also we did one track on that EP which was just purely bongos, tambourine, yang chin, and voices. So we was experimenting as far as we could with what we had. But what made the huge difference between those first recording sessions and the Spleen and Ideal sessions was the fact that we actually got some money from the first publishing deal, and Brendan was able to go out and buy one of the early sampling keyboards so that he could start writing parts for orchestral instruments. Um, and because he was, before we bought that equipment, and he and I were talking about sort of influences and stuff, it was clear that he was he loved the kind of arrangements of John Barry in films, and Nino Rota, and things that the German band Popol Vuh had done for some of the Herzog films, and that was where he was really buzzing, and he wanted to have access into that area. I'm buying this. I think it was a Ensoniq Mirage keyboard that had these sampled sounds. He could start writing for brass instruments, for strings, cello parts, trombone parts, whatever. And then it also actually had a facility where you could hit a button and print out because we were not musically trained, so none of us read music. We just played by ear. But in order to bring in these instruments, we needed to be able to produce scores and bring in musicians who could play these parts. So you could hit a button, link it up to a printer, and this was like a whole new world for us, being able to print scores for brass and string instruments and bring in the players and give them parts.
Wow.
So so it was really, and Lisa was then released as well, because Lisa had a huge love of opera. I mean, she Maria Callas and and the whole opera world was a big influence on her, as well as where she'd been brought up in Australia. She was exposed to a lot of Greek and Turkish and Middle Eastern music.
Oh, yeah.
So she had all those kind of singing sounds in her head. And I think that's a lot of where her her decision, well, not decision, but just with the way she more naturally found her creative place to write without standard English words and use sounds, because a lot of the music that inspired her was sung in languages that she didn't understand. So she was hearing the sounds, but not and understanding the the meaning of the music from the music itself, and not from directly from the words. And I think my understanding is that a lot of her influence in singing in the way she did was because she really enjoyed that from the music that she'd been listening to, that she'd been influenced by, that it didn't the sense of it came to her without being confined in English language words. So all that was in the mix, and so when when they started writing Spleen and Ideal, this world suddenly opened up where they had all these different sounds, and with a little bit more money available from now that we were starting to get established, it enabled us to bring in more people to do to sing parts, to uh, to play these different instruments, and that gave the breadth and this incredible transformation from the first the first recordings that we did to that period.
It seems like Brendan is a very serious person. He has this kind of persona of not necessarily being grumpy, but that he is just very, very, very focused on what his vision is. Did you find that helped you to kind of get into his kind of dive into his tributary and be able to be guided by what he wanted musically, because
Yeah.
you did come from kind of a different world.
No, the lovely thing about both Brendan and Lisa is that they are both 100% committed and serious about their music. When we were writing music, when we were playing music, it was total focus, and it really had to be right. And I that was fine by me. I bought into that completely. That's what I wanted. But away from the music, they're they're like people. We had a lot of laughs together, a lot of fun together. Yeah, they know how to relax as well. So yeah, so obviously, when they're talking about music, when you see them doing anything that involves the music, then it's totally serious. It's 100% focus. Um, and I don't know about Grumpy, but if things weren't going right, he could really lose his temper and get angry and get very frustrated. But it was only ever because he was so serious, so concerned that the music was as good as it could be.
For sure.
So yeah, it's that's it. That was all. That was always very serious. But aside of the music, we were normal people chatting away and jokes and whatever.
And Lisa was making hummus and selling plants
Baba
door to
Ganoush.
door.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, funnily enough, they both worked in a Lebanese restaurant back in Melbourne for a
Wow.
while, and yeah, so they both had a bit of culinary training, and we
Lovely.
we all liked our food, so food was always an interesting area of for a meeting of minds. But yeah, Lisa, yeah, she made. It was actually a baba ganoush, which was one of
Hmm.
my favorites that
Mine
she
too.
brought from the her time in the Lebanese restaurants. Yeah.
Yummy.
Oh, that's awesome.
To backtrack a little bit,
Hmm.
wasn't that original Frontier demo released on some box set or something at one point? It seems like I remember that.
Yeah. So the very original was on a uh, what was called a fast forward cassette.
Lonely as an eyesore.
Oh, well, yes, that's a slightly rearranged version of it. As far as I can remember.
Okay.
The very original recording that was done in Australia was on a a 4-track cassette that Dead Can Dance did actually in Australia. and then I think they managed to get the original. It was it was a 4-track recording. The original was just a 4-track recording, and I think they managed to get that and made a few adjustments to it um, for the version that appeared on both on the first album and then on the Lonely as an Eyesore video. And we did we did that live as well. We did a live in our earliest live shows. We did a version of Frontier.
Lovely. I love that song, but we have started talking about albums before we have properly started talking about how you got the recording contract, how you met Ivo, and how you all became such an integral part of 4AD and sort of the, if it could be said, a sound of the kinds of music that they were putting out at that time in the 80s.
So, when I started rehearsing with Dead Can Dance, we gradually, from the rehearsals, we put together a demo tape of 4 tracks again, and I started sending those because I'd had the experience of doing press and PR work. I sort of became our sort of promotions manager for the band as well. So I started. Brendan had already sent some before we met. He'd already taken some tapes around to some of the indie record labels in in London, and not had any response to those. But we did a package and send them out again. Decided to go for. I mean, it was pretty obvious the companies that we were going for. It was 4AD, Mute, Factory, who weren't in London. They were in Manchester, and Cherry Red, one or two others. And so when we sent out the tape that I put together with this little press release and that um, we after a few weeks we had a phone call from Ivo saying basically that he was interested, or he liked the music. I think Frontier in particular was the one that grabbed him, and he was obviously taken with Lisa's voice. That was the thing that jumped out at him. Um, and he was it was it was a bit strange at first because he'd taken the trouble to phone us, which was great. But he basically phoned us to say, "I like your music, but I can't do anything with it at the moment because I haven't got any spare budget to work with." So it was almost like it's very nice, but it seemed like a no thanks. But then he asked us if we were available to do a gig. So of course we said yes, so that he could see us play. So at that time he had the German band Exmal Deutschland were over in the UK touring. So he put us onto the bill for a couple of their shows as the opening act. And the first one we did was at this club in an old cinema down in Brixton in South London called the Ace. And after that performance, Ivo came backstage, and he was obviously he already knew that he loved Lisa's voice, but now he was raving about what he just couldn't believe what Brendan could play on the guitar and sing at the same time. And although we'd had one or two technical issues with the show, he was clearly blown away by it, and we'd had a tremendous audience response to it as well. So suddenly everything changed, and he was really keen to work with us. So he wanted to discuss it. So he came over to dinner with us one night, and we, we sat and chatted into the early hours. And then he went away and thought about it for a bit, and came back to us and said, "Look, I'll give you 2 weeks in the studio to make an album." So That's it. So I think we hadn't actually signed anything at that point. I think we actually signed the contract after we did the recording. But I mean, that was it was all very sort of haphazard in at that time. That's how it worked. So yeah, it was. We obviously were very grateful to Ivo, and it was great to have that connection, and we were very happy to be on 4AD. It wasn't that we'd we'd specifically wanted to be on 4AD rather than anybody else. It was that Ivo was the one who came back to us. So it was kind of uh, a sort of a big coincidence, if you like, that particularly for Brendan and Lisa, that they ended up being on the same label that the birthday party had been on when Nick Cave and the others first came over from Melbourne in Australia a couple of years earlier, and had basically gone down exactly the same route and ended up on 4AD. The 4AD sound is an interesting one. I don't think. I mean, what Ivo did was it was pure indulgence for him. He just signed people that he loved. He wasn't creating a sound, and he wasn't looking for people who sounded the same as each other. He just, if it moved him, if something, worked for him, then he would sign it. And the press came up with this thing about a 4AD sound, but when we look at it, if you take the Cocteau Twins, Dead Can Dance, I'd, what else was around at the time? Wolfgang Press, Zymox. When you look at that range of bands, you say, were they really sounding the same as each other?
Wolfgang Press, yeah.
To me, no.
Color
But
box.
Diff Juice.
I can get that people who liked one or other of those bands may well also like the other things, but was it really a 4AD sound? I'm not so sure, and I don't think Brendan and Lisa ever particularly felt that we were contributing to a 4AD sound. And we were also a bit sort of maverick with the contributions to This Mortal Coil, which we thought was a great project. And the first thing we ever heard on that was Robin and Liz's version of Song to the Siren, and I can remember us all crowding round the round the television the first time that they performed it live on TV, and we were on edge because Liz was so nervous, and we all wanted this to go so well, and she was like a rabbit in the headlights, and we were, oh no, but still I mean, the performance came over and she sang really well. And I mean, that was a stunning cover version that they did. So when we got the opportunity to make our various contributions to This Mortal Coil, we were very happy to be involved. But Brendan and Lisa in particular said the whole principle of This Mortal Coil was they were supposed to be cover versions of songs that Ivo loved, done by artists of his choice, but in a style in a completely different style. But Brendan and Lisa didn't want to do that. They wanted to write their own songs for it. So I think I'm right in saying that the pieces that we contributed to This Mortal Coil were the only things that were not cover versions. I'm not sure if that's completely true across the board, but it's I think that that goes. So again, we were perhaps not rebelling, but not wanting to be forming a 4AD sound. We just wanted to do our own thing, and if that worked for Ivo within part of that project, that was great by us. Yeah. So, but it was great being part of 4AD. We got on well with a number of the other artists. I particularly got friendly with or although we never got that close and didn't see that much of each other, but I used to particularly love Richard Thomas's work in Diff Jazz. His drumming was amazing. and some of their stuff was really it still ranks amongst my favorite music of all time. Some
Mine
Absolutely.
too.
their stuff. And again, I wouldn't particularly call that part of the 4AD sound. It was
True.
something very different. Again, they had some reggae and disco influences
Mm-hmm.
in what they were doing. They were quite subliminal, but they were there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it was a great buzz, and we did a few shows where we'd have several of us on the same bill together, and it was good. There wasn't we weren't competing with each other. We were all there to perform with it. And the first tour I ever did with Dead Can Dance, when we went out on tour with the Cocteau Twins, I mean, I was just in seventh heaven to be going on and playing each night with this amazing band I'd just joined,
Yes.
and then going out front in the audience and having a free Cocteau gigs every night. It was,
Oh
Yes.
my
I
Oh
thought
God.
God.
I thought I'd landed in paradise.
No
So
shit.
yeah, it was an incredible time. It was really great, and
Yes, I can only
it's
imagine.
also it's lovely that I when my book came out, I hadn't been in contact with Ivo personally for about 30 years or something. Not because we were avoiding each
Wow.
other, but just how he,
Mm-hmm.
went out of the music business at the end of the 90s, and I wasn't involved in anything that brought me into his sphere. And we just hadn't been in contact for all that time. And then Brendan told me that he'd apparently been wanting to read the book but hadn't been able to get hold of a copy or something, which sounded odd. But anyway, I said, "Well, don't. I'll sort that out." So I immediately had a copy sent to him, and yeah, then Brendan had given him my email, and I got a lovely email from him saying that he thought it just completely captured the serendipity of the situation and how everything was. Nobody really knew what they were doing. We were just all in it for the love of it and just busking it. And he particularly loved the way that I'd captured that. So that was lovely to hear as well, that he responded to it so positively in that way. So yeah, it was very great times.
Oh yeah.
I would say more than a 4AD sound. I see 4AD's music more as a season or an atmosphere. And it feels like there's an atmosphere that you are in when you're listening to a 4AD album. Um, and I can't believe how emotional I'm getting just thinking about this music because it's so meaningful to me. And I can honestly say it saved my life because I had gone through many traumas as a child and in my teenage years. And I
Mm.
used your music as a blanket. It was something that I really needed. I needed that tether to this otherworldly place. And it was so powerful because it gave me a sense of purpose as well. Because I understood that there were other people on this planet who were expressing something that seemed divine.
It is extraordinary how many people have said that, and it's an incredible thing to hear. The music that you've been involved in has reached people and affected them to that extent. But yeah, music has that power for sure, and 4AD, particularly through that 80s and early 90s period. It really did reach people in that way. And yeah, it's very moving. I can't really say much more about it than that. But when you hear people say that, yeah, it really touches you.
Yeah, I know myself, I'm very selective when I say a 4AD sound because that's my own personal way of categorizing what I gravitated towards most during that time period. And so I think of, for first and foremost, Dead Can Dance, Cocteau Twins, and This Mortal Coil are the holy trinity right there as far as the dream worlds that that
Okay.
music would take me into, and almost a metaphysical place, a universe in and of itself. So I'm cherry picking my bands. I'm not thinking of Cindy Talk or Color Box or Birthday Party or even the Bauhaus album that came out on 4AD. I'm thinking of a specific group
Hmm.
of 4AD songs, or not songs, but groups. Um, did you, when you started playing with Dead Can Dance, and I know it's probably a very subjective experience to be a part of all of that, but did it at all teach you, or did you feel that your way of conceiving what music is capable of doing or communicating got bigger? Did it expand at all?
Uh, yes, I think the the power of the response that we got from people at when we played live, and seeing, uh, looking out into the audience and seeing the responses of people to, when Lisa was in full flight with her voice, or when Brendan was in full power with something that he was doing. Yeah, there was an incredible sense of uh, both a kind of awe, but also a really strong connection as well. Something very personal. People had a very personal, very strong personal reaction to Dead Can Dance, and uh, y- and people would come up to us after the shows to talk to us, and have had this, incredibly, have been really moved by it. And yeah, for me, I'd been so focused, so concentrating hard on making sure that I was, holding my parts right, and playing correctly, and making sure that it was so important for for Brendan and Lisa. What they didn't need from me was a showy drummer who
Mhm.
wanted to show off loads of techniques and crash all around the kit. What they
Mhm.
needed from me was somebody who locked the whole thing down and would almost not be noticed. It wasn't important for what the drummer was doing to be noticed by the audience. It was important for it to be the bedrock on which they were building their layers.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's why we gelled well for a long time, because all I wanted to do was to make their music work.
Hmm.
I had no interest in my own being anything in my own right. So so we work well together in that way, I think. And so I was kind of, yeah. I always felt like I was sort of standing back a bit from the situation and watching how people responded to watching how the audience responded to them, and got this incredible buzz off what they were doing. And particularly, I had these wonderful moments in the set where I would sometimes, because I would sometimes go up and play the Yang Chin parts in some of the songs, and I would be physically shoulder to shoulder with Lisa, because her mic was always set up next to the Yang Chin. And to be there on stage with her head right next to mine, with that voice coming out of it, and then looking down into the audience and seeing the reaction to that, was really, um, I think I can't put it into words, but it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, I can
So
imagine.
yeah, I totally got the connection that was being made, and yeah, I I imagined a number of those other 4AD acts had a similar kind of connection with their audiences. I mean, I wouldn't have been personally exposed to that in the same way, but I could imagine that. Yeah.
I, uh, I was thinking about the, your role in that is in many ways you were like the heart of the band, the heartbeat. So you were the energy that the blood was it it was necessary for you for the blood to pump into the other vessels and into the other, arteries. But I just quickly wanted to comment on Song to the Siren. last year we interviewed Larry Beckett, who is the gentleman who actually wrote the lyrics. And we asked him what the birth of that song was. How did he come up with this poetry? And because he's a poet, and he said that it was divinity. It was really something from, like, he was channeling something from beyond. And I feel that with Lisa's voice, and just with the collection of artists in this band, that there is something that is being penetrated from this other space, this other realm. It must have been amazing to just allow yourself to be part of that, and to maybe tap into something divine within yourself. Do you feel like there were ever moments when you were performing where you felt like some form of an ascension? Or you're talking about how the crowd was reacting. Did you feel like you were having some otherworldly experience?
Unfortunately, I have to say no, but there's a reason for that. And the reason is I always had to be completely focused on what I was doing technically. Um, it, it was, as I was saying previously, it was absolutely essential that I concentrated on making sure that a lot of the beats that I used to play in Dead Can Dance were pretty much exactly the same thing through the whole song.
Mhm.
And so there's no you're not just doing a timekeeping thing and having a fill every few bars
Yeah,
to keep you focused. To
exactly.
play in that very metronomic way and hold a rhythm. So as I say, it was what was very important about the drum patterns in Dead Can Dance was that they created this this very solid bedrock that absolutely locked things down for everything else to be built on.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um, and that took an immense amount of concentration. It did for me, certainly.
Sure.
Anyway,
Mm.
so I couldn't afford to let myself go drifting off into some other place.
La La Land, yes.
Um, but what's interesting is that both Lisa and Brendan are also very different in that way. I mean, they both perform with huge passion, but Brendan's always very focused. He remains. He knows what he's performing, given singing beautifully, playing all sorts of stuff on originally guitar and then the other instruments that he brought in. But he's also acutely aware of what everybody else in the band is doing at that moment, no matter how many different performers are on stage. And he's almost, if he had more arms, he'd be conducting as well as playing and singing. Um, whereas Lisa she generally goes off into another place as soon as
Oh, yeah.
a song starts and she starts singing.
Yep.
She's away.
Yep.
She's on a different plane.
For sure.
And that's that was also always an extraordinary thing about concerts with Dead Can Dance and being with both of them on stage, and going from one song to another where you'd have those two completely different aspects to the way the song was being performed. Um, So, yeah, so the direct answer to your question is I would love to have been able to go off into the world that perhaps some of the audience were going into with the songs, but I
Yes.
couldn't afford to do that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the advantages that the listener has over the performer is
Mm.
that we have the
Yeah.
luxury of just bathing in it, and you have to be focused on delivering it. I think maybe, after touring for a long, long time and playing these songs so many times, you get to a point where you can sort of, one part of your brain can play that almost automatically, and another part can almost sit back a little bit and appreciate it, or allow yourself to daydream a little bit. But I think that takes maybe thousands of hours.
Yeah, there is an element there is an element to that. I mean, and you certainly notice that over the course of a tour, as the tour goes on. you are able to relax a little bit more into it, and perhaps enjoy
Mm-hmm.
being absorbed into the music a little bit more.
Hmm.
But still, yeah, that focus has to remain, or for me, it did.
I would love to talk about that first tour with Cocteau Twins. It
Mm,
it
sure.
seems like he that, that would have been very challenging in many regards because this is the first time you're going on the road even just for a few days. Uh, can you kind of describe what that was like being on the road with these forces of nature? I'm sure it was amazing.
Yeah. It was it was just great. It was fantastic. I really, I was pinching myself the whole time. I couldn't believe it was happening. Um, I mean, I hadn't even really. I'm not sure if I'd even ever been out of the UK before then. So I had to run out and get a temporary. They used to be able to get these temporary passports at that time,
Mhm.
just a little cardboard thing from a post office. And I'd had to run out and get that. Um, and I was also uh, kind of part tour managing the band as well. So I was a person. I was responsible for making sure that everyone was in the right place at the right time, and that we picked up our payments as we went round, and we got our documents stamped, all the customs, and all this kind of thing. So I had a lot to think about, which I enjoyed. I loved doing all that as well. Um, so I then through that I became very close to the tour managers of the Cocteau Twins as well, who were with us. Um, and yeah, it was an absolute buzz. I mean, the pressure wasn't on us so much because we were the support band. So people were coming to see the Cocteau Twins. Nobody had ever heard of us at that point in Holland. But because the Cocteaus had been booked into all these quite really surprisingly small venues for them at the time, it was kind of they were at the point in their trajectory where they were just going from sort of small medium to big. And I think the promoters had underestimated their selling power. So we were playing these venues which were about 400 or 500 capacity, and they were all sold out months before we arrived. And what happened was that because whereas very often if you've got an unknown support band, the audience is still in the bar when the support band's playing and sort of drifts in maybe halfway through or whatever. Because a lot of the Cocteaus fans wanted to get good positions ready for their show, when we went on stage, the halls, these venues were already packed. They were already full. So we got to play to, virtually the full audience that the Cocteaus were going to play to. Um, and yeah, we we were well rehearsed by that stage. So we were. I mean, Brenda and Lisa are very confident people on stage anyway. They just get out there and perform. They're naturals on stage. So there were sufficient nerves to focus the mind, but it wasn't, we weren't freaking out or anything. And yeah, we do. And we had these amazing audience reactions as well. From the moment the first song started, the audience was engaged and we were getting a tremendous response. So it was great. Yeah, we were having an absolute ball. And as I say, for to be able to do those performances and then go and watch a Cocteau Twins gig afterwards, night
Oh my
after night.
God.
Even I mean, it was only an 8 or 9 date tour, but
Mhm.
even so, I was loving it. But unfortunately, it was for the we were really enjoying ourselves and getting this great reaction. The Cocteaus were having a tough time because it was in that brief period where there was only the two of them, just Robin and Liz. The original
Hmm.
bassist Will had left, and it was before Simon joined.
Yes.
So there was only the two of them, and they were actually Liz didn't like that at all. She, I mean, they had, because there's so many layers of guitar in the Cocktails music, they had masses of it on backing tape.
Hmm.
So Robin was just playing sort of whatever guitar parts he could over the mass of it, and the drums and bass and everything being on tape. And Liz felt very, very exposed. I mean, for me, their performances were still great. I thought they were fantastic. But as the tour went on, she became really withdrawn and unhappy with it. So it was a bit of a shame to. It was a bit sad, really, watching that happen. But even so, for my own experience, it was yeah, I just had a ball. It was fantastic.
I think that my own take on why the crowds were so appreciative is because bands like Dead Can Dance and Cocteau Twins were giving them a kind of sort of nourishment that you cannot get from many bands, particularly at that time, because those types of music just operated on a different level than REM or the Hoodoo Gurus or, any of those other bands. This was on a different level altogether. This was a band for philosophers, for psychonauts, for people who read literature. Like this was there's just a different feel to the audience, I think. Their tastes are maybe a little bit more refined, and they're a little maybe perhaps more reflective. And yeah, maybe I'm superimposing my own character on all of this, but what one of the things I really
Yeah,
enjoy.
I think I can only really respond to that by by saying that if I if I hadn't been lucky enough to have that opportunity to have met Brendan and Lisa when I did, um, there's no doubt in my mind that they would have gone on to do exactly what they did, whether I was part of it or not. They would have found
Mhm.
somebody else, and it would have happened in much the same way. Um, and I would have been a massive Dead Can Dance fan.
Yes.
Yes.
Their music would have. I would have heard it on John Peel,
Yes,
and I would have been blown away, and I would have been in the audience at those gigs.
absolutely.
And if I'd been at those shows as a member of the audience, going to a show that had Dead Can Dance playing in that period, and then the Cocteau Twins, that would have been a life highlight
Oh, yeah,
for me for sure.
absolutely.
I I was just lucky enough. I just had this incredible luck to actually be a part of it, which is still blows my mind to this day. But
Mm.
there we
And
are.
and that's one of the things I really enjoyed about your book is that you seem to be very present and appreciative at the time that all of this was happening. It's not more like you're looking back and
Mm.
going, "God, I wish I would have, realized how great things were." You realized how great things were in the moment, which is very refreshing.
The very first time that I went into the rehearsal studio to audition for them, and before either of them had started singing, Brennan and Paul just started playing some of the interaction that they'd been working on between guitar and bass. I just thought, this is very different. This is
Mm.
something really
Mm.
special. And yeah, and then as soon as I heard the other elements coming in, I mean, the first time I heard Lisa sing,
Oh
and I'm,
god.
sort of a couple of yards away from her,
Yeah, no
and this
shit.
voice begins.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can imagine.
The hairs on your neck stood up.
So yeah, so yes, I was like the mega fan who was actually sat on the drum stool. It was incredible.
So what was the dynamic between the women like? Because as to my knowledge, they've never recorded a song together. What was their energy like? It seems like
Sorry, who are you talking about? Lisa
Liz.
and Liz.
Yeah.
Um, no, they. I mean, they were. We didn't really have that much contact with the Cocktails. I mean, we obviously we did the support tour with them, and then we played with them on a one or at least one other occasion in London. And we would sort of bump into them very occasionally. They came up for one of our early headlining gigs. Came along to support us, which was lovely. But we didn't really have that much contact with them. And also, there was this thing that was going on in the press where, where the press was saying that Lisa was copying Liz because she sang without words as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't cause any friction or conflict, but it meant that we were a little bit cautious about aligning ourselves too closely because there was no thought
Mm,
to. Lisa had started singing in that way before she ever knew that the Cocteau Twins existed, and
mm,
likewise, Liz had never heard Lisa when she started doing what she did. So it was just coincidence. Um, but it also made us a little bit wary of aligning ourselves too closely and not getting lumped because we didn't want to be lumped into this thing. We saw some kind of negatives about the press wanting to have this sound that they were determined on that everyone was buying into, and it wasn't
mm,
really like that. And 4AD didn't want it to be like that, and the different bands weren't trying to be like that. So I suppose there was a little bit of cautiousness about that. Um, and I don't there there was just never really a situation that I can think of where Liz and Lisa would have been in a place where they would sing together. It was like I don't remember it. As far as I know, it was something that was never mentioned. Not because it it wouldn't have been a good idea, but it just we were doing our own things. We were working in our own spheres, and it didn't really come up. Um, and then Robin got into doing quite a bit of production work for other bands that were on 4AD,
mm,
but Brendan wanted to be the producer of Dead Can Dance music,
mm,
and as soon as he had the wherewithal after the first couple of studio experiences, he was away and he was doing that. So there wasn't really the sort of scope to have these crossover areas with us and the Cocteaus. I mean, I
mm.
personally loved following what they were doing and loved their albums and that, but yeah, it wasn't something that was consciously avoided, but it just those stars never aligned. It
Sure.
just
Mm.
didn't come about.
I love the story about the John Peel sessions and the whole footy element that may have prevented you from being featured.
Yeah,
Can you?
okay. I'm not really sure. That's just I threw that in as a as a little sort of amuse bouche. But
Oh, it was hilarious.
so
Can
what
you
happened was
talk?
yeah. So what happened there was that I mean, would your John Peel show is known? Is it
Yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah.
because
very
I know
well
it
known.
as a UK. I don't know how well.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, John Peel was basically the one radio show in the UK in the whole of the UK. After once the pirate station sort of went off the scene, the
Mhm.
one place where you could hear a wide variety of music, all sorts of different stuff, and the left field stuff, and the whole indie scene was John Peel's show. Nobody else was playing that. So he had this devoted audience, and you could actually define that. That's something you could define yourself as either a John Peel listener or a non-John Peel listener, and then
Mhm.
somebody would immediately know quite a lot about
Right.
where you stood in the musical spectrum. And so it was essential for AD. Well, all the indie labels, Factory, 4AD, Mute, Cherry Red, everybody. You wanted to get your stuff on John Peel because it wasn't getting played elsewhere. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you're doing press and PR for any of those record labels, as soon as you got a new band, as soon as you got a tape or anything, the first thing you did was you sent it to the John Peel show and tried to get some exposure on there. And he was great because he used to, he would not just play stuff from record labels. You could be a band and you made a 2-track recording in your attic and you send it in to him, and there's a good chance he would listen to it. He tried to listen to everything that was sent to him, and if he liked it, he would just put it on and play it, which was incredible. And he launched so many careers and got so many bands off the ground that would never otherwise have got that exposure, because obviously there was no internet in those days. There was nothing, you couldn't go out and get that exposure yourself anyway. So it was very important, and then also obviously over the years he became legendary with the John Peel sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So he used to just any band that he liked, he'd invite them to come into the BBC studios. Most of it was done in a particular studio in Maida Vale, which is in West London. And there would always be 4 tracks, and you'd go in and you'd be given a sort of 10-hour session to put your 4 tracks down. And then he would, yeah, then they would be played, and you'd get a basic fee for doing it. And it helped. It was a big thing to get those sessions. So he 4AD, as once we started recording, 4AD started feeding some of our stuff in, and after a while we got in. It was actually when, just as we got back from that first tour with the Cocteau Twins, we we got a call from 4AD to say, we've got your first John Peel session.
Cool.
So that was all the next great excitement after we got back from the tour.
Nice.
So we went in and did that session, and it went well, and Peel played it quite a few times, and that from that we were able to start doing our first headline gigs, and people were coming along who then actually knew us from the couple of support gigs we'd done, but principally from the exposure on John Peel. Um, so then after a few months, we got invited to go and do a second session. But by that stage, we'd recorded the EP,
Mhm.
Garden of the Arcane Delights.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And for most, I think 3 of the 4 tracks on that session were to be tracks from from that we'd recorded for the EP.
Mm-hmm.
So Brendan knew the guy who'd been the producer working with us, the engineer and producer, when we were doing that EP in the studio we were using, was also a guest producer for John Peel shows. So Brendan phoned up the producer on John Peel and said, would it be possible for us to have this guy come in and produce? Kenny Jones, his name was,
Mm-hmm.
not the same Kenny Jones who was the drummer in the Small Faces, a different Kenny Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And said, could we have Kenny come and do this session for us? And Walters thought that we were some, sort of upstarts who were trying to tell him how to do his job or whatever. So he said, no, sod off.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have whoever I decide is going to produce a session. So we got in, and it was this Dale Griffin, who I think did our first session as well. It'd been fine first time round. It's not that we had any problem with him. It's just that because you're working with such short, you've got such short time span to get these tracks down. We just thought it would be in everyone's interest that it was a
Yeah.
producer who already knew the tracks. It would just
Exactly.
make sense. But anyway, wasn't to be. John Walters decided that it was going to be this Dale Griffin, who would the former Mott the Hoople drummer. So anyway, it started off and it was okay, but then things started to get a bit tetchy, and we think that maybe he'd been tipped off by John Peel that we'd asked for somebody else, not him. So
Mm-hmm.
he was a bit sort of anti us
Mm-hmm.
to start off with. And then as the session went on, it just deteriorated, and I wasn't so aware of it because I'd recorded my parts and they were all down, and I'd just sort of gone off to do whatever I was doing. But in the control room, obviously Brendan and he were getting more and more at loggerheads, and then he started going off, disappearing out of the room to go off and watch some cricket match or something that he was
God.
interested in.
How
So
insulting.
Brendan was tearing his hair out, and in the end, the two of them had a massive row. The session got completed, and actually, I think the songs that came out of it were pretty good. Um, I they've got a really good live energy to them, and I actually think it's a really good session. So I was happy with the final result. But in the meantime, Brendan and this Dale Griffin had this massive, they were nearly at each other's throats. And so word got back to John Waters, and Waters told Peel, and after that, they took against us, and so our session just got played. There was actually, it was contracted that the session had to be played 4 times, I think it was, and then after that, John Peel never ever played anything by Dead Can Dance again.
Oh, wow.
So it was unfortunate because it meant that our audience in the UK stopped building.
Mhm.
And we're actually, Dead Can Dance to this day is not particularly well. You could go out into the streets and walk around London and ask people if they've heard of Dead Can Dance, and you wouldn't get, unless you were in Camden Market or somewhere, you'd be unlikely to find that many people who have heard of the band. Um, and so we started really building our audience through touring abroad, and we were finding it difficult to get gigs outside of London in the UK as well. We just didn't really come after John Peel stopped playing us. We just stopped building an audience in the UK. So it's a bit of a shame, really. But anyway, we did okay elsewhere, so we were happy with that. But one of the thing that you were asking me about that amused you was that one of the other possibilities that we thought of why maybe John Peel took against us was that this is a soccer related thing, is that John Peel was known for being a fanatical supporter of Liverpool Football Club in the UK. But then later on, he moved to live in an area of the UK called Suffolk, where the local main team is a team called Ipswich Town, and he started following them as well. And it just so happens that Brendan's an Arsenal supporter, and John Peel is a Liverpool fan. There's long been a thing between Liverpool and Arsenal, and so John Peel hates Arsenal. And also, I'm a fan of a team called Norwich City in the UK or in England, who are the arch rivals of Ipswich Town. So it was just an off the cuff thing. I said maybe if he found out that Brendan was an Arsenal fan and I was a Norwich fan, they would have been his two ultimate teams to be against as a Liverpool and Ipswich fan, and maybe that had some bearing on it as well. But the chances that in reality he actually knew that are pretty limited.
Well, after we've discussed the sort of the musical leap between the first self-titled album, the EP, and then Spleen and Ideal, and it just kept moving after that.
Yeah.
With the addition of all these different instruments, more orchestral instruments, how did that translate to live shows? Were you able to pull that off, or did you have to synthesize the horns?
Yeah, with with considerable difficulty,
Mhm.
because we went from being a 4-piece on stage to being a 10 to 12 piece on stage, and trying to mix electronic instruments, still needing to get the full spectrum of sound which Brendan had made. We were still having to use some keyboard generated computer sounds,
Mhm.
which at that time all had to be loaded on endless floppy disks.
Yes.
Every track had to have a different floppy disk because
Mhm.
the storage on them was so limited.
Yes,
So we
exactly.
were trying to mix electronic instruments, computers, and
Wow.
acoustic instruments. and the sound issues we had and feedback problems were huge.
I can imagine.
So it was, when it worked, it was fantastic,
Mm.
but we had enormous technical problems, and the sound checks used to start at about 8 o'clock in the morning and
Oh,
still
wow.
be frantically trying to finish them before we went on stage at 9 o'clock in the evening or whatever.
Crazy.
Wow.
It was crazy, and we were also we were trying to tour with timpani drums, you know, the big orchestral kettle drums, as well as the drum kit
Mm-hmm.
and
Mhm.
gongs and goodness knows what else to get this breadth of sound that had been created for Spleen and Ideal and uh, yeah, it was an amazing, it was incredible to do,
Mhm.
but it did have technical issues that drove us to distraction. So
I would imagine.
I think people who went to the gigs in those days, who, you know, there's a few of them who are still around, who we're still in touch with, and they say they were incredible shows. And, you know, they were, as an audience, the audience was always prepared to go with the technical difficulties we were having in order to experience, because there were those moments in those shows when it just all came together, and, you know, the sound was incredible and like people had nothing people had ever heard before. Um, so I would say it was worth it, but we only really toured like that for perhaps 2 years, and then we had to pare it down again and make it a more workable thing to tour to take out live. Um, so yeah, it was extraordinary to be part of that process, but it was not without its headaches.
I'm sure.
And kind of piggybacking on that, you had an experience that was very frightening when Brendan got electrocuted. Can you tell that story?
Well, no, that was early. That was in the earlier. That was right at the beginning. That was actually the first gig we did on the tour with the Cocteau Twins in Holland in 1983.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it just shows you how ridiculously inexperienced we were, and it's a good example of the, you know, what Ivo was talking about how we, you know, we none of us knew what we were doing. We were all winging it.
Mhm.
Um, so we went over to the to Europe to do our our first show, and we were in a quite a well-known club in Amsterdam called the Paradiso, which is a bigger venue than most of the ones we were doing on that tour. I think that was probably more like about 600 or 700
Mm.
capacity venue. And on that particular bill, there was another band on between us and the Cocteau Twins, a band called the Europeans. So the Cocteaus had done their sound check, the Europeans came on, did their sound check, and as ever in those situations, by the time we got to go on, we had about half an hour left to do our sound check before they wanted to open the doors. So it was all
Mm.
panic and fly on stage. Um, we rushed all our equipment onto the stage, went to plug everything in, and discovered that we had all UK plugs on all the electrical equipment, and they have a different plug system in Holland,
Oh, man.
in the whole of Europe, and we didn't know because we hadn't been before. So,
Yes.
Mm.
and nobody had told nobody thought to say you have changed your plugs or you've got adapters, or no, we never didn't know anything about it. So suddenly somebody had to be sent out to the local hardware store to buy a whole bag full of European plugs, 2-pin plugs, and while we were getting, you know, while I was setting up the drum kit and we were getting the amps into place and everything, a whole team of people were frantically going around changing plugs on everything.
Mhm.
So anyway, we finally got it done. We managed to get a little, you know, got one sound check song played or something, then got chucked off because they wanted to open the doors. And then, you know, as soon as the audience was in, we had to go back on stage and play as a first support band. And it was going well. The audience was appreciative of the first couple of numbers. it was the first time I'd been in a situation where they were actually relaying our performance onto screens at the back of the auditorium. So I was having to be careful not to get distracted watching myself on the telly and not concentrating on what I was playing. Um, and then we were about halfway through the third or fourth song in the set, and suddenly there was this enormous flash and bang, and Brendan was lifted off his feet, um, and was suddenly shaking violently.
Mm.
And I looked at our bassist Paul, and it was like in that moment, what do we do? But Brendan had programmed us so much that we never stopped. He said, whatever sound problems we have, any problems on stage, never stop playing.
Yes. Even if
Because
somebody's
I'd
dying.
once, in one of our first gigs, we had such feedback problems when we were playing Frontier that I'd stopped in the middle of the song, and he went mad at me. He said, never do that again. So now there's this thing that I had no idea what was going on the side of this, with him at the side of the stage, but I'd been told never stop playing. So I'm not going to stop playing. I'm carrying on playing. And Paul was looking at me, and sort of obviously the same uncertainty was going through his mind. Lisa, for her part, realised what happened was Brendan's guitar had gone live, so now the full current was going through his guitar, and he was basically being electrocuted at the front of the stage. Lisa went to run towards him I don't know, I mean, that was just her natural reaction. She saw him panicking and ran to try and help. Luckily, the guy who was the engineer at the side of the stage who was doing the foldback mix, he realized what had happened, and he came running onto the stage, screamed at Lisa to get back and not touch Brendan, because then she would have been locked into the electric current.
Exactly.
And he did this incredible kung fu kick and managed to kick Brendan's guitar off him, so to break the circuit. And it just got it enough that Brendan was able to throw the guitar down on the stage. The audience all thought they thought this was some effect to some like pyrotechnics thing that we'd conjured up, and they thought it was great. So they're all cheering. So then, of course, now Paul and I stopped playing, and we all kind of. There was this sort of mass panic, and we got Brendan off stage and calmed him down, and he was very shaken, but fortunately not cooked.
Good.
So yeah, it was So we had to we had to end the performance. So things could only get better after that, and we didn't have any further problems on that tour, technical stuff. But yeah, it was a very frightening moment, and it could have been, without the quick thinking of that sound engineer, it could have been much worse.
Jesus.
So yeah, that was a lesson learned. But what we also discovered after in the in the after when we were looking back at how this had happened, it transpired that that particular plug on Brendan's amp that had caused the problem had been changed by his own father, who was with us on tour as driving the minibus for us. And so he was, beside himself, because he, suddenly became aware that he was made aware that he could have brought about the demise of his own son. So that was, a pretty heavy situation. But yeah, we can look back and smile about it now. But yeah, that was quite a hairy thing when it happened.
Jesus
Wild.
Christ. Well, in 1986, Lisa was actually in a movie, Moonchild. And Dead Can Dance did the soundtrack to that. Did you have anything to do with that?
Yeah, that was actually 80. It wasn't quite as early as 86, 88. That was in 88. Yeah, her and Brendan she went and she was asked to do this the lead role in the film. Um, and yeah, as a band, we weren't really involved in the soundtrack.
Okay.
Brendan went out for the later part of the filming and and did the soundtrack for it.
Gotcha.
So yes, I wasn't I can't I wasn't there. I wasn't involved at all.
Mhm.
So I can't really tell you much
Sure.
about that. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a great
yeah, she
movie.
did it, and it was a yeah, it was. I mean, it sort of toured on a kind of art house mini festival circuit, and I yeah was well received in its sphere. But yeah, it wasn't something we ever. I don't think we ever played any of the music, ever incorporated that into any live set, as far as I can remember. So yeah, it was sort of an isolated project that that they did aside of what we were doing main in mainstream dead can dance. But yeah, good, yeah, interesting experience, I think.
Yeah, yeah, she was a really great actress in that movie.
One of my favorite stories in your book is, about the cult, actually, and the cult trashing a hotel
Oh,
room. Can you tell that story? It's so funny.
yeah. So that was in 1984. We were um had the opportunity to uh yeah, we were invited to do this sort of sort of lightning mini tour of Scandinavia, um, which was originally going to be 4 gigs, and then it was paired with one of them dropped out for I don't know why. So we ended up it was just 3 gigs, and it was a you know it was a long way to go at that time. They didn't fly us out there. We had to get a ferry across from the UK to Denmark, drive across Denmark, go over to Sweden, and then we had 1 gig in the middle of Sweden, 1 gig in the Swedish capital Stockholm, and 1 gig up. We had to then drive up to Oslo for for a show up there, and then come all the way back to the UK again. So it was a bit of a crazy distance tour just to play 3 sort of fairly small gigs, but it was an interesting experience nevertheless. But so yeah, we'd done the ferry trip to UK to Denmark, then across to Stockholm, and we arrived. We'd been delayed. Our ferry trip across to Gothenburg had been delayed, so we arrived there at some unearthly hour and desperate to get to bed. And then when we got up the following morning, we discovered that the cult had been staying in the same hotel, and they were on their they'd just finished they were finishing their Scandinavian tour, and they were on the way out. Um, but what we were then told by the promoters was that the hotel that we were booked to stay in Stockholm, the cult had stayed there a couple of nights earlier and had trashed the place. They'd done all the usual rock and roll staffing and thrown the tellies out the window and
Oh,
Mm.
smashed
Jesus.
the place up and left beer cans and whatever else all around the rooms and everything. So the promoters had been told by the hotel that they were never having any bands in there again, but
Mhm.
we were going to be the last ones because it was too late to cancel our booking. So okay, so now we're turning up to Stockholm, having never been in the country before, with a band called Dead Can Dance, which, if you don't know what's behind it, perhaps sounds a little bit intimidating, and with a hotel that was obviously going to be terrified about us turning up there. So when we arrived, it turned out to be this really beautiful little, what I guess now you call a boutique hotel. I don't think that term was known at that time, but that's probably what you know it as now. and it was lovely, and it had all this sort of antique furniture, and the people who owned it obviously took great pride in it. Um, so Lisa just said to us, "Right, leave this to me," and she she had her hair all piled up as she used to do, and this long flowing gown on, and she just sort of glided across the foyer, and you could see we were all sort of cowering in the doorway, and you could see these staff sort of hiding almost behind the reception desk, and she just said to them something along the lines of, "We heard what those horrid boys did to your hotel, and we're going to treat it with kid gloves."
Mm.
Or something along those lines. And you could see these people I thought they were going to leap over the desk and hug her or whatever. They were so relieved. Um, so we did. We were on our absolute best behavior. We left it as if we were in the scouts and we'd gone round and made sure everything was exactly as it was before we came in.
Uh-huh.
And maybe hopefully we restored their faith a little bit, but whether they ever had any bands in again after that, I don't know. But yeah, I
That's
like to think
awesome.
that yeah, we were never part of that kind of rock and roll circus. We never
Yes.
wanted to go and trash hotel rooms or do anything like that.
Were there
That was us.
any drugs or substances of choice that the band would engage in, or were you all pretty straight laced when you were
Uh,
touring?
I d- I've always been happy to have a drink. I've never been a drugs user myself. It's just not my thing. Um, there was a little bit of usage. I mean, if you're touring around, with bands and you're in and out of studios, the stuff's always around. So
Of
yeah,
course.
sure, there was a bit about, but I, um, yeah, it wasn't something, it didn't feature in it wasn't necessary in the making of Dead Can Dance
Yes.
music, and it certainly wasn't used in us to perform. I
Uh-huh.
mean, one thing I also found that for my role in the band, what I had to do, I always went on stage stone cold sober. I couldn't. I never even had a drink before.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Once I came off, that was a different matter.
Sure.
But
Mhm.
yeah, on stage I was always stone cold sober. And I never really understood how we played one gig in the UK with the band The Fall,
Oh, shit. No, Robert
and
Smith, my god, or not
when I went
what's
in
his name?
there, when I saw the quantity of substances that they
Oh my
consumed
god.
before they went on stage, and they went on and gave a absolutely banging performance, and
Yes.
I've no idea how you do that. I don't. That doesn't feature in my psyche. I don't understand how you can
Well,
do that.
there
But yeah, but they were great. They played. They were.
their music has a little wiggle room for sloppiness and
But
a rough
yeah,
edge.
that was that was probably the biggest drug haul I ever saw.
I'm sure. My god.
Mm.
I've heard that band would get in brawling fights with each other on stage just on a regular basis.
Very likely, yeah. I didn't see that night, but yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised. Yeah, yeah.
Mark Smith, that's his name.
I think that was when we played with them. There was the period when they had yeah, when we played with them, it was at the time they had Bricks on guitar. He's the American woman who Mark Smith married, and I think she was a bit more. She had a slightly stabilizing influence of them. They weren't quite so wild with her, and so maybe I'm not right about that, but I just felt maybe that might have had some slightly dampening effect on their craziness. But I personally, I enjoyed their show. I thought they were great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my favorite period of the fall with Bricks,
Mm.
along with the
Yeah,
band.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah, great stuff. So what was I gonna oh, the what was the last album that you played with Dead Can Dance?
So after I wasn't really that heavily involved in recording apart from that very first album. I was doing all the live work all through the 80s. But Brendan and Lisa, once they had the technology and the ability to do it, a lot of the recording, um, they did by themselves. So I wasn't so much involved in the recording. But then the last tour I did with them was in 1990, and then after that, our my second daughter was due to be born, and my wife was working in a high-powered job in teaching, and it just wasn't fair for me to say to her, I'm just buggering off on tour for 3 months. Um so there was no split. It was completely amicable, but I just had to say to Brendan and Lisa at that point, I'm gonna have to bail out. um so that's how that happened. But then when they were recording uh starting to work on the Spirit Chaser album in 1995, when the album came out in 96, but the recording was started in 95. Brendan phoned me up and said that he'd been getting into a lot of samba rhythms at this point. He was actually running a local samba band in the town in Ireland where he lived, um, and he wanted to put together an 8-piece rhythm section to just lay down a load of bass recordings that he could then work with for this new album that they were starting to work on. So I got this phone call from him one day saying, would you be able to come over to Ireland for a week and do some percussion sessions with a group that I'm putting together, which was going to be him, and Lisa was going to be involved, and Brendan's brother Robbie, who I was close to all three of them, and then some guys from the local Irish scene who had been working with them on their 93 tour. So of course that was an amazing opportunity, and I was just so thrilled to be back involved again. So I
Mm.
was didn't have any hesitation in saying yes, I'll be there. So I went over and did those sessions. We had a great time. In the end, I think only 2 of those sessions that we recorded ended up on tracks on the Spirit Chaser album, and then also there was another one that was used for a song, an instrumental track called Samba Tiki, which was used on a tour program. There was a CD included in the tour program that was done for the American tour in '96, which had that track on it.
Mm.
So yeah, I got to be a part of that again, which was great. So that was the last time I recorded with the band.
I saw that tour in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the night it was an outdoor concert, and the night of
Okay,
that show, there was a full moon.
right.
So as Lisa's singing, this beautiful orb of the moon is
Ah, lovely.
floating up in the
Mm,
sky. It was magical. It was really wonderful. I wanna go
great.
back to kind of the beginnings of the recordings in the studio. You were
Sure.
talking in your book about other bands that were recording at the same time. It really seems like, again, this was a very magical time in music. Can you describe and tell the audience who else was recording in the studio kind of in the same period?
We didn't really encounter that many people in the different studios we were in. When we recorded the first album, we were in a studio with which was used constantly by Vince Clarke in his post after um, Depeche Mode, and also after Yazoo. So he would have been working on stuff for the Assembly probably at that time.
Mhm.
Um, and also Rick Buckler, the drummer from the Jam, was using that studio at the same time we were in there.
So
Um,
who
but
was recording
I think that's probably
upstairs at Eric's?
yeah. So upstairs, Eric's the studio was owned. This Blagwing studio where we recorded the our first album, which was used I think for all the This Mortal Coil albums.
Mm.
and had been used for the early Cocteau Twins. It was like the studio that 4AD used all the time in those early days. It was owned by a guy called Eric Radcliffe, and Vince Clarke was a good friend of his, and used the studio, and then, well, pretty much once he had his his fame and his money, he pretty much moved in there and took over a section of the studio. So he'd been recording there for some time, and the Yazoo album that's called Upstairs at Eric's, that was recorded there. So they called it up. It was recorded upstairs in the studio that Eric owned. So that's where the title came from. But it was a very good studio for synth bands, but for an acoustic, for the stuff that we were doing, where we wanted acoustic drums and some acoustic effects added into the guitar and bass. It wasn't really the right studio for us, so we had a lot of problems with getting the sounds that we wanted there. So we only ever used it that once. So as I say, I remember um, Vince Clarke being around a lot of the time when we were there, and also Rick Buckler, the ex-Jam drummer, was rehearsing his current band at the time in a studio at the other end. So yeah, so that was our sort of brush with well-known people as we were embarking on our recording career. But after that, we didn't really. We used John Rivers' studio up in Leamington Spa for Spleen and Ideal, Within the Realm of the Dying Sun, and Ion. And he was working with a lot of other bands at the time who were in the same sphere. I mean, Love and Rockets, who were ex Bauhaus, and Zymox went to record with him as well, and so those kind of bands were in there, but not when we were there. They were just there at other times,
Mm.
so we didn't encounter them. So I can't think really there were occasions when we were in the studio where there were other bands around.
Mm.
So
Were
it
you
was mainly when we were touring that we would come across others.
were you at the time going out and seeing a lot of live music, or were you just kind of focused on the band when it kind of in the beginning days?
Yeah, we uh, probably we did go out sometimes and see things, but probably surprisingly not as much as we might have done really. We were still not earning that much money, so we were still having to sort of get by on a fairly small budget. And we'd occasionally get invited. I mean, we could go obviously to any of the 4AD gigs, and we'd sometimes go along and see one of the other bands, and that was great. But and Lisa used to like going and sneaking into the opera. Um, she used to go and buy the cheapest tickets right up in the gods in the Royal Opera House, and then during the first interval, she'd go down to one that she'd spot during the first uh, part of the opera where there was a sea free somewhere lower down, and then she'd be all dressed up, and she'd just go down and glide past the ushers, and they never thought to stop her, and she'd just go and sit down and get herself a better seat. So she used to go and and see quite a few operas. Um, so yeah, but no, not we weren't really we weren't out on the town all the time, that's for sure.
So, and you also, to my knowledge, have put out 2 solo CDs yourself. And how did did your time with Dead Can Dance have anything to do with this flavor of music or the mood of music that went into those discs?
Yeah, I mean, I very deliberately didn't try and copy Dead Can Dance because that would have been ridiculous. But the methodology, I mean, they're very much my songs, and I always said right from the outset that I would hope that people who are into Dead Can Dance would give them a listen,
Mhm.
but I never had any expectations that Dead Can Dance fans would automatically like what I what I did. It's very much my own thing. Where it was heavily influenced was in the sort of writing style that I learned very much from Brendan in particular. A lot of the way I went about composing my songs owes an awful lot to what I learned from him. And also that the first album that I did simply wouldn't have happened without him. I mean, he offered to record it for me in his studio. So I actually had 2 tracks already recorded at John Rivers' studio in Leamington Spa, but then the other 6 tracks for that first album I would never have happened without Brendan offering to give me the studio time and producing them for me. So I'm massively indebted to him. So he had an input very much on the way that album sounds. He played some additional parts on it for me, and he produced it, but he didn't interfere in any way with with the basic writing structure that I'd done. So he helped with a bit of additional orchestration and stuff, which was lovely. But yeah, they're my own. That was my own thing. And then the second album that I did, I really felt that I had to finally break away and do something that I completely controlled.
Mhm.
So that's very much that one's very much my own thing. And so I basically wrote and played all the parts on it, did all the singing on it, and sort of co-produced that album. And I know it's a bit rougher than, it doesn't have the polish of the production that my first album has that Brendan did. But for me, it was a very satisfying album to do because I did it all. I did it all myself, and that, and so I'm still very happy even now with that album. I know it's not quite as polished as the first one was, and it's certainly not in sonically in Dead Can Dance territory. But I'm still very happy with the songs that I wrote, and yeah, it was a great thing to do. Um, but again, as I say, I did both those albums would never have come about if it wasn't for Brendan setting me on the path to it and giving me all that help to get the first one off the ground. So
Mm.
again, I owe so much to him for that.
I think they're both lovely, lovely
Mm.
albums, and they do completely have a feel all to their own. I wasn't trying to
Well, thank
insinuate
you.
that you were trying to copy Dead Can Dance at all or anything like that. Do you have any
No,
plan?
no, I know, no, I didn't think that. No, no.
Good, good, good. Do you have any plans to record any other music?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just because just purely for financial reasons, it takes me a long time between projects. They're not
Sure.
commercially successful projects, so it takes a bit of time. But so I did after the 2 solo albums. I then the second album got put out by a New York label called City Canyons, through which I got to work with the guy who'd set up and run that record label, Trevor Lloyd, and he's a producer himself and an arranger, and a very capable one in my eyes. And he offered me the opportunity to work with him on a collaboration project, where we would co-write the songs, and then he would bring in. I'd be involved in performing certain parts, varying amounts of parts on each of the songs, but he would bring in different musicians from a whole pool of people he worked with on the New York scene.
Cool.
Mm.
And so over between, we actually started that project in 2008, but for various reasons, the first album wasn't released until 2013. But then we did 3 albums, one that came out in 2013, one in 2015, one in 2019. Um, and they were very varied. They involved probably over the course of them 50 or 60 different musicians, all really exceptional people in their own fields. A vast array of different instruments. We really sort of indulged ourselves. Um, and they're all sort of quite different things again, but it was a it was a project that I hugely enjoyed working on. And the intention was pretty much from the outset was to do this trilogy of albums. So we did that, and then decided that that was the we compartmentalized it, and that was what we wanted to do. So Trevor's off working on his new projects now. I've been dormant for a little while on the music front, so I then wrote the memoir and then enjoyed that process so much that I then wrote a novel,
Oh, cool.
Oh,
which I'm
amazing.
still putting the final touches
Nice.
to. And then my idea is that I would like to. It's got a kind of music theme to it,
Mm,
so I'm then hoping to write and record not a soundtrack album, but a sort of companion album that um, picks up on different themes and aspects of the novel. So
Cool.
that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment, and
Very nice.
is in the pipeline.
Very nice.
But that's going to be much more of a sort of a dark folk based kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Cool.
It would be so amazing if someone did a documentary about that period of time musically, because you're so well spoken and you're a fantastic writer. It's really a wonderful book. And I will just, as we kind of wrap up, I will show the cover of your beautiful book again.
Thank you very much.
I am again so honored, Peter, that you have come and joined us today on this beautiful Sunday. Um, any plans in the future for any type of a collaboration again with Lisa and Brendan, either together or separately?
Uh, the answer to that is that it's unlikely, but never say never. I don't know. I mean, they're they're both very involved in their own projects at the moment. I'm involved in mine, but
Hmm.
they're still both great friends of mine. I don't. I mean, I don't. I haven't seen either of them for quite a while now. I think since 2022 when we went to their show in Glasgow.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I love them both dearly, and I owe them both so much. And if ever the opportunity arose to work with either of them, I'd be there like a shot. But I know they're very focused on what they do, and as I say, I'm in my little world, and
Mm.
who knows, maybe, but yeah, nothing. Honestly, nothing in the pipeline.
Well, if we ever get the
But thank
funding
you very
to
much for having me, and it's lovely to speak to people who have such a great affinity with the period that meant so much to us, and I'm very glad that it's brought you so much happiness and been such an important part of your lives. It's a beautiful thing.
It absolutely is. How can anyone that would like to purchase your book or maybe get in touch with you regarding any of your music? How would people go and find you online?
There is a Facebook page for the book. There's the publishers is a company called Red Hen. You can always email them and they'll pass on anything to me. The book is available. The Red Hen, the publishers, did a fantastic job with the distribution on it. It is just available everywhere. If I Google it, it comes up on sale in Japan, in Taiwan, in Vietnam, in
Wow.
Brazil, Mexico, Chile.
Fantastic.
Incredible everywhere, every part of Europe. So they did a fantastic job. So I think buy it from wherever you if somebody wants to buy it, you should find it wherever you normally buy your books from. For people in the States, I would always say if if there's nowhere else you want to go in particular, my the record label Project that released my first solo album, Sam Rosenthal there, I love the guy. He was very supportive of my stuff, and they have it available from their website.
Cool.
Fantastic.
So I'd always say go and support Project because they're a great label. But really, yes, I mean it should be freely available wherever you normally buy your books.
Lovely.
Well, we highly, highly
But
recommend it.
if anybody has any difficulty, yeah, if anybody has any difficulty finding it, please email Red Hen and they'll pass on to me and we'll sort it out.
Fantastic.
We won't. We'll make sure anybody who wants to read it can get a copy.
Yes.
Even
and it
Ivo.
is- And it is definitely a page turner. I highly, highly recommend it.
Even Ivo, yeah, absolutely.
And I want to thank you so much. It has
Yes.
been an honor and a blessing to speak to you.
Yes, Peter. Thank you. And we will let you know when this comes out.
It's great. Thank you so much.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Yeah, lovely. And yeah, no, we'll obviously I'll promote the link through the Facebook page and the publishers will put it up on their site as well. So we'll
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
support each other.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Peter.
Great.
All right.
Take care. It was wonderful to meet you.
And I'll send the link to Brendan and Lisa as well.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Talk about a bucket list. I would absolutely love I would love to
absolutely.
talk to Brendan at some point, and Lisa. I don't know that I could ever get a word out.
No, I can't. Yeah, I can't arrange for you, but I'll send them the link
Oh, that would
so
be
they-
fantastic.
so they know it's there.
Beautiful. Awesome.
Sure.
All right. Have a great day.
Okay.
See you, Peter.
And you.
I'm giddy as a schoolgirl.
Oh my God. That was absolutely astounding and amazing. And this book, if you are a fan of music, even if you're not a fan of these bands, but you are a Gen Xer and you love music from that time period, this is such a great look inside of a time period that is so rich with creativity, and I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. It is absolutely wonderful, and Peter was so kind and so thoughtful to come and be on the show.
I agree. I'm going to see if there is a way that I can play some, like intersperse a few songs within this interview. For those who have no idea who Dead Can Dance is, I've come into contact with more people who have not heard of Dead Can Dance as opposed to those who have. Actually, most people who I talk to have never heard of this band, which is a sad thing, to be sure. So if I can at all do it, including Peter's music too, I will intersperse songs, and you'll already have known because whether they're in or not, because this is the end of the episode, but and that will give you a taste, or will have given you a taste of what this band is and how absolutely magical they were.
Yes, completely mind-blowing, and just to get a little pinhole glimpse into this period of music that was so important to both of us, and how powerful uh, an influence and an effect the music had on both of us, I think is it just takes what we're doing to a completely different level. Um, it's great to talk about cryptids and aliens and conspiracies and lots of subjects that we cover with our guests and share with our audience. But to talk about something so personal, something that really has had such a powerful effect on my life, um, it's just really important. And I feel very honored to be here with you. And I feel very honored to have this show to be able to reach out to people and ask them to be on the show and then have them accept is absolutely mind blowing to
Yeah,
me
for sure.
because again, it's so personal. And this is something that I never thought I would get kind of this insight into kind of the other side of this band and what it was like to be kind of in the beginning stages of the band and to watch that band develop and go on tour with them. And there's some great, hilarious stories in here. And I think it's a real page turner.
Yeah, if you like, I like books of stories of music scenes, and particularly if they're near and dear to my heart. And this is definitely that book. I remember I was not too long out of high school, living in my parents' house. I had a one of those 70s stereo consoles that were basically a piece of furniture. And the top would open, and there would be a turntable there, and a dial for the radio, and a place to store a few albums. And I had that in my room. I inherited it from my grandma when she passed away, and I bought Spleen and Ideal at Street Side Records in University City, Missouri, suburb of St. Louis, purely on, I'm not sure if I think I was into 4AD at the time. Um, if not, it was one of the very first 4AD albums that I bought, uh, purely on the cover of Spleen and Ideal. And you can look it up and see for yourself, or maybe I'll post a photo with the episode. And I put it, I was the afternoon, probably a day after school, and I hadn't played it yet, and I put it on the turntable, and I remember putting the arm down on the record, and I was, immediately transported into a completely different level of reality. And that sounds dramatic, I know, for people who maybe don't see music as something that can actually, uh, alter your mind or change your frequency or take you to some place. They see maybe music as just something that, has a repeating chorus that you sing along to and you air guitar and play air drums to. But music can actually be much, much, much more than that. And the kinds of things, I mean, the music is one thing on one level, on many levels actually, of Dead Can Dance. But you read the lyrics and wow. It's just really hard to describe. And I've wished that I could share this with the kids, but it I think it has to be a certain set of circumstances, where I was in my life, where the context of what was going on in the culture and in my life and what was going on around me, everything fit together in such a way where that album had a very intense impact on me. I'm holding back from letting myself weep. But, uh, yeah, I can just I've listened to it so much, I can probably just press the play button in my mind and play the whole thing in its
Mhm.
entirety, from beginning to end, and it's just a very, very moving piece of music, and, yeah, I'm sorry to keep rambling on.
No, it has the same. Just the I would say the same about the first album, and I think it's because of the time period and where I was in my life when I came upon their music. I For me, I started with Cocteau Twins, that's kind of where it all started for me, and
Mhm.
prior to that, I was listening to The Cure.
Yes.
Um, I had this very deep need to, um, explore reality via music, and so when I kind of got into Cocteau Twins, it like, everything made sense for me, like, the music just made sense to me, and then when I found Dead Can Dance, I it was really like, "Oh, now I really get it." Like, now I really understand this ancient connection with music and sound, and Lisa's voice,
Jesus Christ.
married with Brendan's lyrics and Brendan's voice and the orchestration and the arrangement of the music was so completely, all-encompassing, and I had this I wanna say it was like a Sony record player, and it was the winter, and I just took the needle, and I would just continue to just put it right back on as soon as the record finished, like, and I just was obsessed. I was absolutely obsessed with the music, and it was very personal to me, so I didn't really need, um, consensus. I didn't need anyone else to like the music that I was listening to. It felt very much mine, and so when my best friend was also into the same music and we had this connection, I felt like, "Okay, there's someone else on this planet who understands how important this band is and how important Dead Can Dance's music is and the evolution of their music and how important that is." And then to so many years later, marry someone who understands the importance and the value of music in general, but also of these bands and has that same, resonance and that same connection with the music and these bands is something that you could only dream of, you know? It's not like liking Metallica, or I know people who are obsessed with Bruce Springsteen and his music and have seen every Bruce Springsteen show that he's ever toured in the United States, and that is just their thing. Uh, but with this, you really had to curate your experience of going because they didn't tour a lot and they didn't like, you had to be very intentional about it, and I was lucky enough I've been lucky enough to see them more than once, and I didn't get to tell Peter this, but I saw them on my birthday in New York, and at the Beacon Theater, and it was sublime. It was just absolutely amazing. I went by myself, um and it was just one of those life-changing, life-altering experiences, and I just feel very honored to be able to speak to Peter and hear his version of the Dead Can Dance reality, and what a joy it was to work with Lisa and Brendan.
Yeah, I saw Dead Can Dance twice and Lisa Gerard once, and they were both absolutely mind blowing. Where is the thing that I just looked up? You can keep talking. Where?
Was it lyrics? It was all the
Yeah.
way at the very end, the last one?
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Yes, here's an example of the lyrics. First song on the second, well, no, I bought Spleen and Ideal, their second album. Then I went back and bought the first album. So this album, Within the Realm of the Dying Sun, was the first Dead Can Dance album I bought like the day it came out. I was like, I'd caught up to them now, and now I was
Mhm.
looking forward to the next album. First song on the first side is called Anywhere Out of the World. We scale the face of reason to find at least one sign that could reveal the true dimensions of life, lest we forget. And maybe it's easier to withdraw from life with all of its misery and wretched lies, away from harm. We lay by cool, still waters and gazed into the sun, and like the moth's great imperfection, succumbed to her fatal charm. And maybe it's me who dreams unrequited love, the victim of fools who watch and stand in line, away from harm. In our vain pursuit of life for one's own end, will this crooked path ever cease to end? Fucking hell. That's that's amazing soul plumbing shit right there. At least it was for me. And I remember listening to that in the dark in this apartment that me and my friend Jeff Price were going to be moving into, who surprisingly, the pixelated version of Peter Ulrich looked like Jeff Price. And it was an empty apartment. There was no electricity. We had a boombox that had batteries, and I just bought the cassette of Within the Realm of a Dying Sun. And we were in the dark drinking beer, listening to this, and I was just I can't describe it, how I felt. Anyway,
It's amazing. I mean, and all these years later to have this moment where we're getting to speak to someone who was a part of that, who played on these albums and who had his own experience and his own influence of working with Brendan and Lisa. I just, it is such a tremendous honor that words just can't even possibly express how deeply grateful I am to Peter and to Brendan and to Lisa and to all the other fans, to the people who get it, who listen to their music and understand it
yeah.
and feel that same blanket, that same encompassing energy when you are blessed enough to be able to listen to their music. So, again, we highly recommend this book.
Yes.
Um,
Highly recommend the band.
I want to do everything I can to support Peter's creative pursuits because he really has done some amazing stuff. And this is, you know, something that I think is really important. It's important to be able to read a memoir um, because in some ways, it's a historical document. And there's a lot of people who will not uh, ever have that same alchemy and that same moment in time
Mhm.
that Peter was blessed enough to experience. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Brendan. And thank all of you for being with us on this journey.
And if it's available, I will put it on our reading list on bookshop.org, which you can get to the link on the above bar, the navigation bar on the top of our website, the Melt Podcast, at themeltpodcast.net. I'm flummoxed. Um, anyway, thank you all so much for listening. Hopefully you, if you're a Dead Can Dance fan, were able to drink the nectar dripping from this conversation and know what we're talking about, or even if you're familiar with the Cocteau Twins, similar vibe. I mean, similar vibe in the sense that a music that can open up mental and spiritual territories
Mhm.
that the cult certainly isn't going to fucking ever do in their wildest dreams. Fuck the cult. Anyway, they're just such they're such 60s posters. Anyway,
I know. I love the cult.
yeah,
So
I think
there's
they're
two different versions of reality.
just hearing
Just
that
only two.
story. Yeah, exactly. Just hearing that story, just like, yep, they're the knobs. I assume that they were.
Just on polar opposites of
Yes,
Lisa and
for sure.
the rest of
Yeah,
the band.
I don't mean to end on that note. So
No.
I'm gonna say yes. Hopefully, if you aren't familiar with these bands and got something from it on that level, you will look into this stuff
Yes.
and seek it out, and maybe it will resonate with you, even a tenth of as much as it has resonated with both of us.
Yeah.
So
If you're a Gen Xer, this is your read. This is just because it will just remind you of what a poignant, beautiful time period the 80s were, the early 80s, and how lucky we are to have experienced that time period.
And Dead Can Dance is a band that you're never gonna listen and put on one of their albums and it goes, "Oh, but that sounds so 1980s."
Yeah,
Like,
no way.
it's completely and utterly timeless.
Timeless,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's gonna your great-great-grandchildren are gonna get as much out of it as we did, so
Yep.
okay. Much love to you all. If you need to contact us or would like to contact us with, recommendations or whatever, the Melt Podcast, at protonmail.com or
You can reach me at hunter-muse@protonmail.com, and I have been getting your emails, um, a lovely woman named Maya Rose sent me an email, and I've not had a chance to respond to her. But I just wanted to let you know, Maya, that I did get your email, and I thank you very much for your kind words.
All right. Much love to you all. And until next time.
Meow.